All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome in. Thanks for joining us today. We'll get right into the content because we have a lot to go through with you guys. But first, just some quick housekeeping. So first is please note that this webinar is being recorded. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A or in the chat. We will do our best to answer all of them here at the end. And have fun, get your questions answered. We've got two great guys on here with you, so you should get a lot of great information out of today. And then we want to hear from you. So in our post-event survey that will pop up once you leave the webinar, please fill that out. One lucky survey participant will be randomly selected to get a $10 Starbucks gift card. Always comes in handy. I know I could use one as I go to Starbucks a little too often because it's easier than making coffee at home and I forget to set the timer. Just a quick reminder, so we do have some more upcoming webinars. So we've got our RAC committee meetings all scheduled out through the year. So we've got May 16th as our next one, August 15th coming for Q3, and November 14th for Q4. So pay attention to those. You can register for them on tlmi.com/events. And then we've got some fun in-person events coming up here soon. So June 11th and 12th, we're partnering with Amplify for the Print Think Summit. So make sure you check out the website. I believe that is up and live. We've got our annual meeting, Party of the Year, on October 12th through the 14th, and then Committee Summit, December 3rd through the 4th. So all of the information should be up on tlmi.com for all of those. Check them out. Hope to see you there. I know I get to go. I'm very excited this year.
Hi, we're at the
Oh, and then I went a little too fast, but so we have an awesome video that Mike made for us that we were able to squeeze in right at the beginning of this webinar. So we are super happy that it's working and that you're going to be able to hear it. So let's check it out.
Hi, we're at the Sam's in Grapevine, Texas. This is home of the total scannable store. You can scan your stuff and just walk out. There are no cashiers here. You can buy a TV, put it in your cart, and just leave. How about that? It's a pair of pants at Sam's. I'm much skinnier and taller than that. But there's your tag, and on the back side there's your RFID. Clever. Here's some batteries. RFID is built into this package, or it's underneath the laminated cards. Here's a bucket they're going to charge in $3.76 for, and it doesn't have RFID on it. God bless Texas. So here's some roses. Right? And there's a tag. I don't see the chip on it. No indentation, you can't feel it. I have to ask our expert about that. Here's some chicken. I don't see how they're doing that either. Chicken looks pretty good though. Here's some delicious salmon. Stuffed salmon. Fillets. Oh, here we go. It's on the bottom. Again, we'll have to ask our expert. I don't see a chip. Unless they're so thin you can't tell. Here's some pink salt. Again, nice labels, very clean. No side of chip. Here's a shrink sleeve combo pack. There doesn't appear to be anything on the sleeve, so it must be on the container someplace. Here's some yummy honey almond granola. I don't see the tag on it either. Yeah, dude wipes. I don't know what you're doing with a dude wipe. I'm not a good enough dude to have a dude wipe. But I don't see the... It's on the outside of the package anyway. Interesting. There's another shrink sleeve. Maybe it hides the tag someplace underneath it, or it's inside. I don't know. This is another one. It's a mystery. And here's a dog bed, 29 bucks. Right? It's got a tag on it. Don't see anything that resembles a RFID label on it. There you go. Welcome to the future.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike, for that one. That was fun to see, going shopping with you at Sam's. But without further ado, right, we're going to pass it off to our expert. Mike, I think you got a lot of questions from your little shopping trip. So, Mark, thanks for joining us. And Mike, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, sir. Mark, thanks for joining me today to talk about RFID. It is a pleasure to get to know you a little bit, and that was a really interesting trip for me. Sam's opened up this store in Grapevine, Texas, and it's a starter site, just a test site for scannable, scan and go, I think is what they call it. And so talking about having this opportunity to talk to you, I ran over there, took some stupid video, and left the sound too low for our listeners. Apologize for that, but I thought there'd be a lot of material there, and I think there is. But before we get into that too deep, I wanted to just kind of get a background. If you could kind of tell everybody your background, how did you get into RFID? What makes you an expert in RFID? Because I know you are, even though you won't say you are. Just a little bit about your background.
Sure. My name is Mark Davenport. I've been in the industry 35 plus years. I got heavily involved with RFID back in the late 1990s when most converters didn't even know what RFID was. We had the opportunity to get involved with a small startup out of Rockville, Maryland. Back in those days, the company was called Matrix Incorporated. They didn't have a converter. They had this idea of being able to flip chip a RFID chip onto an antenna and then turn that antenna into a label and figure out how to get that wet inlay inside of a label. And that's kind of how I got started in this industry, and I've been in it ever since. We were always looking, in this industry, as everybody on this call knows, everybody wants to differentiate themselves and not, be a me too. So we wanted to have the ability to do something that not everybody else could do. So obviously me and my team, we jumped on this opportunity and have grown it throughout the years. So with that, back in those days, I used to have a lot of hair on my head. I don't anymore because I rubbed it all out figuring why this doesn't work. How did we make this mistake? So like you said, I wouldn't consider myself an expert. I would just say I've got a lot of experience and do's and don'ts in this industry, and I can always learn something new. I learn something new about this industry just about every day. So if I can't answer everybody's questions, I'll certainly get back to you with the answer because I do know where to go find them. But with that, I'll turn the floor back over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Mark. That's really funny. That's what RFID will do to you, huh? You'll start in it like looking like me, and after 20 years, you end up looking like Mark. So watch out.
And that company that I had mentioned, people are like, well, gosh, who the heck is Matrix? And I've never heard of them. Well, I'll just give you a quick story. Matrix was a startup back in those days in UHF RFID frequencies. Their competitor was Alien Technologies. I'm sure they're still somewhat around. People have heard of them as well. Matrix was acquired in around 2005 or 6 by Symbol Technologies, who subsequently was acquired. That was a large company out of Holtsville, New York, and then they were acquired by Motorola, and then Motorola sold their division off to Zebra. So that Matrix Corporation, not only did they make RFID tags back in those days, they also made the hardware, the scanners and the readers, the fixed readers that used to read the technology. And what made them so famous back in those days was they won the initial Walmart rollout to RFID enable all the Walmart DCs that were using RFID technology back in those days. So thus today they're, you know, Motorola sold those assets off to Zebra. So everything you buy out of Zebra today was started, you know, as Matrix. So anything Zebra's doing with that technology, most of it came from that acquisition. So everybody kind of knows what happened to that company. Just giving a little history lesson there on where it is today. It's still alive and well, and a lot of the handheld scanners that Zebra is marketing and selling through the channel these days were developed in Rockville, Maryland by the Matrix team. So
Wow. Wow. So from day one, basically.
pretty much.
So my questions, right? I'm an ink guy. So my first, you know, all my questions, or most of the ones I've written down, is there anything that an ink can do to mess up an RFID label?
Yeah, certain inks out there, not all of them, but certain inks, especially black inks, you know, have a lot of carbon and metal, heavy metals in them. So if you're doing a heavy, you know, coverage over a label with a black ink that has a particular large amount of metal in it,
Mm-hmm.
it can interfere with the readability of the chip. So you want to use, back in those days, you know, we learned that right out the gate. We had a lot of customers that back in those days, you know, everybody was kind of paranoid about the technology, and a lot of the retailers did not want the customer to know there was an RFID chip, even though it was being used for inventory purposes and not tracking purposes. The consumer back in those days were, oh, I don't want anybody to be able to track me and follow me when I walk out of a Walmart with this package. And they didn't understand the technology. It's passive technology. You're only reading it 5 to 20 feet away from the package with a handheld scanner. We learned early on with these retailers, you know, hey, can you put a block? You know, they were having us quote putting RFID inlays in their prime labels with a blockout adhesive. Well, blockout adhesive has a tremendous amount of carbon in it, and when you put an RFID label an RFID inlay in a prime label with blockout adhesive, you're going to interfere with the signal. So we learned that right out the gate. Hey, these are not working. Oh, why? You know, you contact the adhesive manufacturer. Yeah, it's got a blockout. There's a ton of metal in there. That's a no-no. So when we were having to do special projects like that, we were able to use our ink suppliers at the time. Back in those days, it was like working with, you've been in this industry, it was working with the Environmental Inks, which is now Siegworks, and the Water Ink guys, which is, I guess, like Tiga now. So everything's changed over the years. And they were able to formulate carbonless black inks for us that would not interfere with the, and I'm sure you've had customers ask you for things like that.
Absolutely.
So we got into that. That was a learning lesson right out the gate. We had another one where we had a customer who was tagging duty-free projects all over the world. And, you know, they went out, didn't do the proper testing. Well, they thought they did the proper testing, but some of the secondary RFID labels they're placing on bottles of perfume and things like that. Well, a lot of those decorative packages have a lot of metallic inks on them. So if you place a secondary RFID label on any of those metallic inks, you're going to ground it out. Which brings me up to your video. You know, you were picking up the tin foils in the hot food area of the salmon, chicken and things like that. You're never going to see an RFID label on the bottom of something like that, because if you attach that to that tin foil, it'll ground the tag out where you're not going to read it. You can place it on the top. You can place it on the top, but you might get some interference with all the metal in the oven. Again,
so an aluminum can,
it's all up to the testing. Yep, it's all up to testing. And you know, like I said, today you can go into a lot of airports, train stations, and they have, you know, those smart stores where you scan your credit card, walking into that store, you pick up your sandwich or your hot item, whatever they sell in those different stores. You run it over your reader. They've already done, you know, there's tin foil on those applications too, because they sell hot items. They've done their testing. to where the readers are picking that up. It automatically charges your card and it lets you out an exit door, and there's no employees in those stores at all. And they're popping up more and more. Actually, I saw one, the last one I saw was at the NRF show. They had smart stores in there at the Javits Convention Center, where people were going in, scanning their cards. So they're becoming more and more common. That's, where you'll see it. But definitely, if you're exploring that and your customer's asking you for specific artwork, make sure that your inks are metal free.
Okay.
Or that you're placing the tag on the package where it's not the metal that perhaps is in the adhesive, or the ink is not interfering with the readability of the tag.
Okay. And that's interesting, because I don't think of carbon as a metal, but I know carbon-free black, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
So you got to go to a carbon-free type application. Where do they use RFID the most? Like walking through the store there, they had them on the pants, which,
I don't really know. I follow the Walmart. Walmart has rolled out, just about all of their categories these days are rolled out into RFID, with the exception of the grocery products. I think they're working on frozen foods right now. There's a lot of noise going on around cold chain. I'm not totally up on that. But they've done that. Apparel was the first item that Walmart rolled out the door. They call it men's and women's basics. They've been doing that since the early 2000s. And even when Walmart kind of pulled away from using RFID technology 8-9 years ago, they kind of stopped and said, we're not using it. The apparel guys, one of the people in that category, men's and women's basics, the Hanes, the Fruit of the Looms, the jeans manufacturers, they kept tagging, because at that time, they're not just supplying Walmart, they're supplying other large retailers like Macy's and Burdines and Nordstrom's and things that were still using the technology. So they couldn't afford to just tag this and not tag that. They continued tagging. So that's probably why you're seeing that on the jeans at a Sam's, because particularly, I didn't see what brand you were looking at, but those brands probably go in some of the Walmart stores as well. I don't know. Like I said, I don't follow Sam's that closely, so I don't know if they have their own individual DCs. Perhaps they do. I don't know the answer to that. So if they're going into a general Walmart distribution center, that could be possibly why. But you'll see it. It's very, very common on a lot of apparel. Most all the apparel you see today in these large box stores have an RFID tag, whether they're using the technology or not.
Well, and I heard the other day too, some of it is checkout, right? Like the Sam's, but a lot of it is just inventory.
Right.
Just so they know how many units they have, and they can keep track of that, which, I guess makes a lot of sense.
Well, for folks that really don't understand the technology, the easiest way for me to explain that, like, hey, can you tell me what RFID, what are the benefits of RFID? And I try to give them a pretty simple scenario. I say, go into your general Walmart or Target and go in the apparel area where they've got 500 shirts on one of those round carousels. And so many of them are XL, some of them are medium, large, small, XXL, whatever. And, it's inventory time. It's whether they do a monthly inventory or a quarterly inventory. Before RFID was around, they had to go in there with a handheld scanner, and they had to scan every barcode on every one of those items on that carousel. So you think that they actually captured all those scans? I know they didn't.
No way.
So with RFID, they can walk around with a handheld scanner and they can read all the shirts that have an RFID tag on there within a matter of under a minute. So the ease of taking the inventory these days, RFID's just pushed it light years ahead. Because not only are they capturing correct data, it takes minutes instead of hours upon hours to do it, and it's correct, and it helps them achieve what they really wanted to achieve in the very beginning, and that's eliminate out of stock products and keep the products that are moving in stock, so they can, at the end of the day, their sales are increased. Is
there a dollar value of the product to where there's a sweet spot once you get above this? Like if it's, I don't know, that one was what? Jeans they weren't that expensive there. Say $15.
Yeah, I mean, you're putting they're putting a 3 to 6 cent tag on there. Yes, they can afford that.
Yeah.
And, before it was a bit of a price, back in the early days, when tags were 10, 15, 25, 50 cents a piece, then, it was something that they choked on a lot. But as the technology moved on and things improved, obviously pricing has come down to where many of these retailers now are developing the technology and using it because it's benefiting them.
Is there any place that's better or I guess probably worse? You were talking about like a freezer. Is the freezer going to mess with the
no, yeah, cold chain, I believe that they'll great success in the cold chain environments. It's already being used by some of the major restaurant chains out there. Chipotle is using it right now. McDonald's is experimenting with it right now. Subway is experiencing it with it right now. But Chipotle is probably your best case study when you talk about cold chain and monitoring lettuce and vegetables and meats coming in and out of their stores. I know Chick-fil-A is working on a big program right now with that. And it definitely works. So what is the next area and where does RFID struggle? RFID kind of struggles in the grocery area because there's so many canned items. And again, we're talking about metal. Can you create RFID labels that work on metal? Absolutely, you can. But they're not a 3 to 5 cent label. You're either building a special flag label that will flag off the product, and the marketing folks would manage, the Campbell Soups of the world are not going to like that. So then you got to develop a special backing to go on that inlay. And those backings are normally multiple different types of foams or multiple different types of ferrites, and ferrite is not a cheap substrate. So if anybody on this panel has gone out and bought mount on metal RFID UHF labels, they know they're, anywhere from 25 cents to $1 a piece. They're not cheap.
Yeah, you got to insulate it.
Yeah, so it's a rule of economy on that. You're not going to see that anytime soon in the can. So I think that's why certain retailers have, stayed away from that in the grocery aisle until, the technology advances, and the technology will get there. We will get there someday. The question is when.
Sure.
Kroger's doing a big rollout right now. That's no secret either. They're not going to be tagging their canned items right now. I think they're starting out in their deli area. Again, cold chain, in the deli area, and they're gung-ho with it. So,
that's interesting. You think they'll get away from cans then?
No, I personally believe, the technology will evolve. Like I said, when I first got into this, half of the RFID inlays that, we received into our plant didn't even work. And in those days, the tags were asleep. I'll never forget, the engineers coming down here going, okay, before you convert these tags, we got to wake them up. So we developed a special machine where we had to wake up the chips. Really? And we did it with light. Yeah, we did it with light sources. It was a journey. I can tell you that. Today, we don't have that problem. Oh, the tag, because I'd be like, these tags are bad. They're not working. Engineers would be like, that's because they're asleep. And we got to develop a new way for you to be able to wake the chips up.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah. So you talk about the stress. It was, but it was worth it. I enjoyed everything I learned. And like I said, I continue to learn new things every day.
Yeah. Is there a placement? Like if I got my product and do I want to put it on the top or the bottom? Is there a certain place I want to put this, or do I want to hide it? Or
That's a great question. And that brings up like the ARC lab. Everybody here is probably very familiar with the ARC lab through Auburn University. They do all the placement testing for many of the major retailers, particularly Walmart. So if you're a supplier to Walmart, say you're supplying hoses to them and it's going in the lawn and garden area, and your your packaging suppliers making a belly band for you that's going around that hose. And yeah, obviously the RFID tag is going to go somewhere on that belly band. And, so they will send samples of those bands or labels down to the ARC lab. The actual people who are making the hoses will do that. They haven't quite gotten the converters to do that yet, but I expect that to be rolled out here really soon. And they'll do the testing and they'll come back to you and they'll say, hey, we've done the testing. It works on, these 5 tags, works on all of our tags here. This is where you need to tell your converter to place the tag, and they approve it and sign off on it and they go. So there are resources for the retailers to go to and the packaging suppliers to get those correct lab testments. They got a full-blown lab down there. I encourage everybody who's on this call, if they have signed up for the ARC conference, they are doing a conference, I believe April 8th through the 10th, and it'll be a tremendous learning experience for anybody here who has limited knowledge of RFID and how that whole program works, because they will explain it to you in the full 2-day session.
Nice. How about, and you were saying it too, there's all different sizes of antennas and labels. What determines how big it is or how small it is?
Well, a lot of it is performance rated. So, the smaller the inlay, the shorter your read distance is going to be. The larger your inlay, the longer your read distance is going to be away. So I'll just take, you have a small 1 by 1/2 inch RFID UHF label. You might get with a handheld 4 or 5 feet away on a very small item like that, which is plenty for somebody scanning like office products or stationery in a Walmart. Then you have larger products that are called dual dipoles, which really aren't around anymore. Those were large, like 4x4 RFID labels. And I had a customer reach out to me the other day looking for one, and reached out to a couple of our suppliers, and NXP nor Impinj make a chip that'll work on a dual dipole anymore. A dual dipole RFID tag back in the day, you could read them somewhat 50 feet away.
Wow.
Today, the technology's expanded greatly. Today, you have single dipole products that you're getting 25 to 30 feet read ranges with a handheld out.
Okay.
So like I said, the technology advances every year. They're coming out with new. And that's why I believe someday, they'll have a product that'll be cost effective that could go on a metal can. Someday somebody will come out with it. And
sure.
I believe that they'll get there. They're just not there yet.
Yeah, that's a challenge out there. Come up with a tag that'll go on a metal can, and you can sell it for whatever you want to.
and that's why the chip manufacturers, did away with their special chips that worked on the dual dipole tags, because the single dipole technology is, like I said, there's tags out there you're getting 25, 30 foot read rates on, and those are for tags that go up on, like you were in Sam's the other day. A lot of times you might go look for a can of tuna, and they've or a can of that salt or something, and it's not on the ground floor, but it's 2 racks up in the, if it's got a specific type of inlay on it, you're going to read it with a handheld when you're doing your inventory.
Sure. Or like those pants, they're in a box someplace on the 3rd level, and you need to see how many you got.
It's 18 feet up in the air in those warehouse environments. That's why they make the wider. Normally a single dipole tag is normally about almost 4 inches wide by 1 inch in depth, and you're gonna get a really good read distance on that.
Nice. I guess the one thing that I noticed, and I didn't take a good picture of it on the way out, and part of my video just showed because I didn't really want to freak out the people there at Sam's, you know. But they had two gates that went up, and they're probably 8, 9 feet tall. Anything in the store would fit through it.
Mhm.
But they were side by side, which is interesting. So I bet the distance of the width and height has something to do with the tags that they have on their machine their items there, because otherwise they'd have one big gate, right?
Correct. Those gates that you went through, they could have been several different technologies using that. It could have been EAS technology, which if you didn't, if you had an EAS tag on there and you didn't pay for it and it didn't get detuned at a certain area and you walked out with it and didn't pay for it, it set off an alarm like you see at a Home Depot or a Lowe's. They're very common with those gates at the front doors. Could have been vision technology. Could have been UHF, but most of the products you picked up there didn't have UHF tags on them with the exception of apparel items. So perhaps it was UHF. I wasn't there. I probably looking at it, unless I could see the readers inside the gateway, I couldn't tell you what it was.
Yeah.
But those are the technologies that are being used in those gateways. So you have EAS, which is security, and you have vision technology, which is cameras. They have come light years. They compete with RFID vision. Vision does. So if you didn't pull all your items out of your cart and they didn't catch you scanning all of it, it might tell you you missed an item in your cart. And they could have been the UHF readers where they're looking long-term down the road saying, hey, this is ultimately where we want to be. So we're going to put these in place now. Who knows? But it was good to hear your story that you went in there and there really weren't any live cashiers. So
it was the best trip I've ever had to Sam's.
Yeah,
you get,
that's great.
Because like at Costco too, when you get up to the counter, you have the line and everybody's going through, and it's that whole hassle. Yep. Just walking out, I mean, it was calm. Nobody was freaking out. Everything. You've already messed with your payment because that's already in the Sam's app, and you just walk out. It was not a big deal at all.
Forcing the public to use technology. I love it.
Well, that's one store, so
yeah, exactly. Because I bet
they may not do that at all. Yeah.
There's still people that are a little bit older than you and me that'll walk in a place like that and go, I'm not fooling with this.
Exactly. They're reading.
But the younger, our generation probably, will still go in and attempt to do it. But the younger generation, they're all about that. And,
oh, man,
everything's about the future. And that's really where these retailers want to be. They don't want to have 36, checkout people there that they're paying on an hourly basis. If they can monitor it using RFID technology, that's ultimately the game changer here.
Sure.
And that's where they want to be. And they mentioned this, this was their vision 20 years ago. Sure.
Well, it's real there. And let me tell you, it was very pleasurable. It was really okay.
Yeah.
So with an RFID label, I buy a product, I take it home, I don't like it. So then I bring it back to the store and I leave the label on. They can just read that label again and just put it right back in inventory, or how does that work?
No, they primarily are using that strictly. There's a part number tied to the EPC memory bank on that chip, and that part number relates to, let's say you bought a blanket and you came home and you bought a blue blanket and your wife said, I don't like that color blue. I want you to go get me a red one. When you go back, they're going to scan the barcode on there and they're going to ask for your receipt. And, they're going to credit your credit card, or if you pay cash, give you your money back. That's how they do it. To the best of my knowledge, and if anybody's on here can correct me, I don't believe they're using the RFID, because mainly when we're encoding RFID tags, we're putting the part number to we're lining up the part number with the UPC. So when we check the EPC number, it's got to correlate with the barcode that's printed on that product. Okay. So and we have special measures in place where we can make sure that the number we're encoding on that chip when we pre-encode for a prime label, that it matches that barcode.
Okay.
So that's primarily what they're doing. But like I said, I learn something new every day. To the best of my knowledge, they're not reading the RFID chip and saying, oh, okay, you bought this at 10:02 on Sunday, February 3rd. You had 10 days to bring this back, and you're coming back here 12 days later. We can't,
Sorry.
we can't honor the refund here. Will they get there? Possibly someday, but to the best of my knowledge, that's not what they're doing. But I stand corrected if anybody on this call knows something different than I do. Not that I know it all.
Yeah. And you've only printed how many RFID labels, do you suppose?
Just a few here and there.
Yeah, but we'll see. I mean, that's the thing. This all changes. Are there, if I'm in the store if I have an RFID label, can it be, are there other frequencies? Like if I'm around some type of frequency or something, is there some way in which it can interfere with the label or the antenna?
I mean, UHF, for those of you out here don't understand or, say what is UHF? So you have really two technologies out there today they call an RFID tag. So you have UHF, which stands for ultra high frequency. It's 960 to 980 megahertz. FCC regulate. The regulations in Europe are a little bit higher than the 960. They go a little bit higher, so they work a little bit better over there. And then you have HF. So you hear that HF NFC, NFC stands for near field communications. That's what's on your credit card, which is an HF chip. That stands for high frequency. So high frequency is 13.56 megahertz. So you can see the difference in that. So
yeah,
those are read very, when you use your credit card and you put the card right on top of the reader at a 7-Eleven, and it literally has to sit on top of that thing or it's not going to read it. And that's near field communications, NFC. Or UHF,
okay.
like I said, you're going to read it 5 to 30 feet away, depending on what kind of tag you have. Yeah, there's certain frequencies that can interrupt the technology, but it's far and few between circumstances.
Okay.
So,
are there any, Brandon, we have a question about this.
Yep.
Are there any common challenges in laying up the RFID antenna with adhesives in the prime label construction? Or is it more of a plug and play based on all the advances you've seen through the years?
I will tell you the only difficulties in inserting an RFID inlay, whether it's dry or wet, inside of a label, have stemmed around tire label. So if any of you guys out there are tire label converters, that's a very heavy coat weight of hot melt adhesive. Most of the liners on when they're receiving it have what they call micro perf in the liner. So when you delaminate the liner with that heavy coat of hot melt adhesive on it, apply your RFID tag to it, and you laminate it back together, put the liner back on there. A lot of times you'll get an air bubble in the stock because the RFID is not perforated. So you get an air pocket between the RFID inlay and the liner that's perforated. Outside of that, I've really not had many challenges with the multiple types of adhesives that I've worked with besides that one. That one's another one that'll cause you to lose sleep and lose hair at night. So that's been my challenges in that area. Hot melt tire label adhesives have been just a bear.
Okay. Shane wonders, where do you see digital inkjet and variable data printing playing a part in the RFID label converting process today and into the future?
It's already here. Our encoding line, we encode reel to reel and inkjet, barcodes and QD barcodes and any kind of barcode you can possibly imagine. We inkjet the part numbers and all that. So it's not Today, it's not just encode and thermal transfer print. We do a lot of variable data on press after it's been encoded. So most of your reel-to-reel encoding machines, and there's a wealth of them, there's 5 or 6 manufacturers out there, see them all at Label Expo, where they're doing the reel-to-reel and ink jetting all in one pass.
Okay. And again, the same issues would be with the inkjet ink. Stay away from carbon.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. But don't get me wrong, when you're doing a barcode and it's not a full, you're not flood coating the ink on the label and you've got clear airspace and that ink has metal in it, that's not going to affect your readability on the tag. It's when you're doing like a flood coat.
Okay.
Heavy flood coats is what really messes with it, or heavy metallic inks, the silvers and the golds and things like that. That's where, but printing a black barcode, even with an ink heavily loaded with carbon, it's not going to pose a problem.
Not a big deal.
It's the coverage. It's flood coat. You don't want a flood coat and slap that label on top of that flood coat or underneath it.
Yeah, and most of the time, metal gets into the carbon by accident. In a black, just through the processing, it's more of like the harsh processing. You end up a fleck of steel or something in there. It's not in the carbon, which is an issue for a lot of things. So you're like, in your world, you're not placing you're building, like, how do you make an RFID chip? If I can ask that, I don't know if that's too.
So it's basically called an inlay, an RFID inlay.
Okay, inlay.
The converters today are getting 2 types of inlays. They're either buying wet inlay, which is an inlay that's been die cut, has adhesive on the back of it, and is on a liner. Looks like a roll of labels. And those inlays are put on applicators and applied to the liners of the label products, whether printed or blank media running through your presses. So basically, you're delaminating the pressure sensitive portion of that web. You're running it over a tower. You're applying your wet inlays, which have adhesive on it, which is like a roll of labels, down on the liner, and you bring in the adhesive product back down, nipping it back to the liner, laminating it back together, die cutting it, and finishing it on the end of the press after your testing methods are done. Dry inlays are done a little bit different. Dry inlays come in where the chip's already on the antenna. It's already been flip chipped. Nobody really in the label industry, with the exception of a few specialty converters out there, are doing their own flip chipping. We rely on our other supplier partners like Avery and Tagios and people of the HANA Technologies doing those types of converting for us, where they have flip chip assembly, where they're actually taking the die right off the wafer and gluing it onto the antenna. And then they slit these, and it's done on a polyester, 2 to 3 mil polyester. And then it comes into the converters on reels, where the converter will then put it on their press and they'll apply their own hot melt adhesive to it, and then embed it from that portion into their blank or printed media. So there's 2 different ways of doing it, and that's how the converters today are doing it.
Okay.
So you have dry and you have wet. I'm a big wet guy, because I had to do dry in the very beginning, and it wasn't very fun. But in today's measure, a lot of folks, they're electing to go with the dry because there's a half cent cost difference in a lot of it. And my answer to that is, I can make, when you're running those and you're doing dry, the process is a little bit slower than when you're running wet inlays on a high-speed line. So, other converters like myself that do a lot of wet, will make up for the cost difference in speed.
Do you have more waste in dry or wet?
Back in
waste
the
about
day,
the same?
there was more waste in dry back in the day, but with the new advancement of technology, with machinery suppliers out there that are selling the dry machines for the presses, have got that pretty dialed in. So if you're doing dry today, the waste isn't nearly what I experienced back in the day. They didn't have those machines back when I started doing this. So we were basically taking dry inlays, laminating a transfer tape to it, and die cutting it that way on press, which you can still do today, but most people have dry conversion lines made by several people out of Europe that bring in here, and you can put them on your press, and it just pretty much applies adhesive. It die cuts for you, it inserts it in the label, and you laminate it back, and you're up and running. Just the process is a little bit slower than doing wet inlays.
Mm-hmm. Brandon, thanks for the questions, Brandon. You're a heck of a guy. He has another question. Any common challenges with laying up the RFID antenna? Did I ask that one before? I don't think it. Antenna with adhesives in the prime label construction, or is it just more of a plug and play situation?
Yeah, I answered that one. I said,
okay, I went the wrong way.
The challenges I've had has been around surrounding tire label adhesives, because tires was one of the first areas that, Walmart entered into back in the day, and they were very challenging projects.
Okay. So Jaws is asking, where do you see the programming of the tag going? Any reprogramming of the tags in the retailer or in shop coming that you see?
I'm not really seeing it right now. I mean, we can program a tag, there's another level of advancement. The time it takes to program a tag and lock it these days is a lot faster than it was back when I first started. It was a very slow process, especially when we had customers that wanted it locked. When you write, all RFID tags come with what they call as a unique EPC number. So every tag, if you take a handheld RFID reader and you read a roll of inlays you just got in from one of your suppliers, you're going to read, and that has 20,000 tags on it, you're going to read 20,000 different numbers if they're all good on there. Back in the day when we had customers that wanted locked, password locked, things of that nature, that slowed the process down. Today, that's one of the requirements. So when you encode a tag for Walmart, you got to lock it. And you can do that a lot faster now than you could back in the day. And that comes from the reader folks, the Zebra folks. Those are the folks that have advanced the technology to be able to, have worked with the NXPs and the Impinges of the world to be able to do these functions a lot faster than you could in the past. You still can't lock as quickly as you can encode, but that's improving every day, and it's a lot faster than it was, and it'll keep getting better. But they'll always have, your IC guys that make, the Impinges, the NXP. If you give them a big enough order, they'll write special data and lock the chips for you. But when you're buying from folks like that, you're in the hundreds of millions to be able to do special programs like that. So I hope I answered your question on that.
No, that's good stuff. What are your the final words of RFID? What advice do you have to people? What do you want them, if they can take one thing away from our presentation here today? What would that be?
Ask a lot of questions. Surround yourself with folks in the industry that have a tremendous amount of experience. I do that. Most of the folks that I deal with every day, I've been dealing with these guys for 20 years. So reach out to your suppliers, and you'll figure out real quick who's been in this industry a long time. I mean, you go to your suppliers who are trying to get you to buy RFID tags, ask them, hey, how many years you've been in the industry? I mean, it's not hard to figure it out. So my best advice is surround yourself with people that have been doing this for 10 plus years. You'll learn a lot. I learn a lot from them. And that's been because, it's a fairly new technology, especially to a lot of converters that just do not understand it. So surround yourself. That's the best with all the experts. It goes with the machinery suppliers too. There's a lot of guys with the press manufacturers that have a lot of experience in RFID. That's the best advice. Surround yourself with smart people. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, Mark, I appreciate you making making this worthwhile, because if it was just me, it would have been over 48 minutes ago.
Hey, not a problem. How long have we been going here? I don't even, 50
Yeah.
minutes. Okay.
Yeah, we took up the hour.
Time flies when you're having fun, right?
That's it. And you got good conversation. That's it.
Any more questions with any of the
Any other questions? Yeah,
there?
this is a good one. I think we've covered pretty much all of them.
Great.
Great. I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank John Abbott for introducing me to you and the Abbott folks. They do a great job, and they're loaded with a bunch of smart people, and we're all fortunate for that.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Wonderful organization. Yes,
yeah.
Sir.
And with that, I guess we will have a wonderful day and wish everybody to have a great day.
Fantastic. You all have a fabulous day too. Take care.
All right. You too.
Bye-bye now.